Okay, this is your first video that you're going to be getting into and listening on dealing with this class. Um, Hopefully it works out well for you by doing this. Basically what the videos are entailed to do is to go over the notes that you're going to need to have for the test and to understand the information. I'm going to try to explain it to you in relatively brief little video segments, and then we're going to go over some other things in class. But you really need to get this stuff, and it's not just writing the stuff down that's on the video screen here. You do need to be writing down some of the things I'm going over with you and I'm telling you, because that is also going to be on your test. Okay, the first slide here we already covered, so I'm not going to get back into going back through all of it again. I just wanted to put it back up here so that you again get this idea of what we're talking about with this class. The concepts of politics and this idea of who gets what, when, and where in society is very vitally important when you're looking at this whole realm of what we're going to be studying about. Because really, when you're studying about government, and what we're going to be looking at is this idea of how do we create a society where we take all the resources, we take all of the power, and we take all of the entities that makes up a society, and how do we control those so that we live in a productive, healthy, safe environment. And that's really what we're going to be looking at here, is this idea of how do we create a government that best can do this for us. And the politics is the idealisms, the ideology, which we've been talking about, in terms of which direction we want that all to go. So what exactly is government then? Okay. Well, the concept of government is an institution which society makes and enforces its public policies. Now, a couple other things you want to write down there in your note packet about government is that government is everywhere. Okay. You don't get away from government. It's from the time you are born to the time that you die. Think about it. When you're born, you have to have a birth certificate. Your parents have to get you one. Okay. All of that is government mandate. And it's order for the government to be able to know where you are and who you are, and it's not really, trying to control you. The idea there is to deal with safety and with the ideas of with our society. But really, government is something that deals with everything, from the water you drink to the car you drive to anything you do. Government is going to be involved in that. And that's why this class is so important, is to help you understand that and to get a better idea of how do you want your government to be having control of your life, or in what manner of control of your life do you want government to be there for. So when we're talking about this idea of government, why is it necessary? The big three key things is because, number one, government provides order. Two, it provides peace. And three, it gives us an idea of security. The second big thing about government is the idea of power, the strength, the authority. How much of that does the government need? That's the big ideological battle that goes on between the liberals and the conservatives. Liberals think that government needs to be powerful and that we need to have this authority and control. Conservatives don't. That's what we're going to get into a lot more as we get into the talking about this. And then the last concept is legitimacy, the acceptance of the people to exist in the government. And again, we're going to talk a lot about this idea about the concept of legitimacy in our government, because a lot of people don't necessarily feel our government is very legitimate, and they have a lot of concerns and worries about it. When it talks about public policies, that is the benefits and the privileges that a government decides to give. For example, when the government decides to impose taxes and it collects taxes, what's it going to use that money for? Is it going to be for national security? Is it going to be for health care? Is it going to be for roads? Is it going to be for bridges, dams? What does the government use that money for? When it comes to equality, what does exactly that mean? And how does the government enforce equality in our society? All of those things are vitally important, and they all make up what is called the public policies of our nation and of any nation. And those are the benefits that a government decides to give out. If a government wants to be repressive and not allow any freedoms at all, then they don't give out any public policies, or they don't give any benefits at all. If a government is very democratic and is outgoing for its people, then it's going to be a government that provides a lot. And really, our government does provide a lot. Again, we hear a lot of arguing both sides of this, but really our government is very open, and it does do a great job in providing benefits for our society to keep us healthy, safe, and being able to grow. If man were angels, no government would be necessary. Again, that's a very important quote. We're going to talk more about this one in class when we get back in class. But it's just a neat little quote talking about this idea that, people talk about we don't need government. Well, the fact of the matter is we're not angels. We're humans. And we do have a lot of fallacies. And because of that, we do need to have a control. Now, the question of how much of that control is we needed, that gets into a very excellent debate. And that's what we're going to be doing in class a lot of. Okay, there are different kinds of governments and different types, and just real quickly, we're going to run through these just to make sure you have them. Okay, the first one is a dictatorship. Now, that's where you have a ruler is not held responsible to the will of the people. In other words, if the dictator decides he wants to kill 60 people or 80 people, no problem, he can do that, because he has absolute total control in all areas of that country or that government. He controls the political, the social, economic, and religious factors. Now, when you say about one person controlling a government, really that doesn't take place. Even Hitler was not, we call him a dictator, and we call some other of our leaders dictators, but the fact of the matter is they really weren't. They had other people that were in control of power just as much as they were, but they were kind of the symbolic head of it. So really there isn't much of a government out there that really exists where one person controls everything. But you get the idea that this one small group that is led by that one person does have the ability to control everything. You also have an authoritarian rule. That's a complete control of everything in terms of the political area. But an authoritarian rule does not control everything dealing with the religious, economic, and social. An aristocracy. Well, not too many of these are around anymore, but still there are some that we could get into. That's ruled by the best. In other words, that is set up by the power, the wealth of the family. King rule. Okay, and that's where you get into the idea of a monarchy or a king leading government. And yeah, there are still some countries in Africa and the Middle East that are ruled by this idea or concept, but fewer are developing from it. Now, the difference between a monarchy and an aristocracy is the idea that in a monarchy, it's a God-given rule. Okay, the people or the family that controls and runs that country then are set up because the people believe, who put them in power, that God had given that family that right or that control. Whereas sometimes in aristocracy, it's simply by wealth or power that the family is able to take over and control, not necessarily religion. Theocracy takes it to a little bit more of an extent. It's a rule by God. It is where they believe that the leaders are not just chosen by God, but that the leaders, they themselves, are accepted by God or be equals to God in all matters. And basically a theocracy then allows the people to control all matters of their life, not just the political matters, but also the economic, social, religious, and all other areas of it. Again, theocracies would be some of your Middle Eastern countries that are ruled by the Islamic fundamentalism in some of those nations. Some people argue that in the United States, the Republican Party is kind of more of a theocracy type rule where they believe that the Bible needs to be the forefront of our Constitution and lead us in all matters. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in class. The last two is an oligarchy and an anarchy. Anarchy is simply a government with nothing. There is no government rule, there is no government period. It's basically where people get together and they do what's best for the society by the people talking it over and deciding it. But they don't elect a leader, they don't have anybody who represents them. It's kind of more of a free-for-all society. Again, there isn't any type of governments out there that are anarchies. There's a lot of societies that would like to become anarchies or tries to become anarchies, but it doesn't really work. The last one is an oligarchy, and this is which a government is controlled by a small selective group, usually self-appointed. Now, you look at oligarchy and you think, isn't it like a dictatorship? Well, not really. An oligarchy is a little bit different because of the fact that in an oligarchy, the control is not necessarily in all matters. It's not controlling the political, religious, and economic matters. Really, in an oligarchy, it's a group of people, and when we say small group, you're talking groups, somewhere between 75, 85. It could be as many as 1,000 people that are basically in this small elite group that control it. A lot of people argue again that the United States is more of an oligarchy than we are actually of a democracy. And that is basically because of the fact that when you look at the United States and how we're set up, we do have groups that have very extreme power in this nation that do control things. The corporations, a lot of times, a lot of the political groups. And so that becomes a big issue then. So oligarchies, again, we're going to talk more about them, but they are another type of government that is very fundamental out there in the world. Okay, we're going to watch this video in class, so we're going to kind of skip over that, and then we're going to get into the next thing in class is we're going to get into the theory of the existence of government, and that's going to be dealing with two guys, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, and we're going to get into them in class by watching a video on them, so we're just not going to get into that now. So that's going to end the first video here that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to get into some more of your videos and the other segments here coming up in the next couple days.